In this chapter, we're going to take a look at some best practices for keeping the files and code inside of our theme clean and usable and easy to maintain. We're not going to cover anything really new, but what we are going to do is take all of the things that we learned in the basic theming series and everything we've learned so far in the advanced theming series and make use of that to show you some best practice tips for making maintainable themes. We're going to go back to talking about the example where we were theming this comment form down here. And what I'd like to do is take all of the code for theming this comment form and move it into its own template file. If we look at our themes template.php file, we can scroll down and find that code for theming the comment form. We'll also find there's a lot of code in this file already, and we've only done a couple of very simple things to theme our site. As your theme grows and your site becomes more and more complex, this template.php file is going to get filled up with a lot of code. And I find it's helpful to keep things out of the template.php file, just to keep it shorter whenever possible. Another thing that kind of bugs me about this is that all of this HTML here is concatenated strings inside of this 960 robots underscore comment underscore form function. I'd rather have this theming of this form be more equivalent to something like the node template file. So there's a couple of things that I can do in order to make that happen. One of the things that I can do is adjust the 960 robots underscore theme, or our implementation of hook theme, so that it knows I want to use a template file instead of a theme function. There's a key for this array named template that we can use to specify the name of a template file that we would like to use when rendering this form instead of a theme. So by default, Drupal assumes that you want to use a theme function, name of my theme underscore comment underscore form, or theme underscore comment underscore form, and so forth. As soon as I add this key of template here and a template file name, it'll actually look to see if there's a template file and use that to render it as HTML. So I can say I'd like a template file named comment-form, like so. Note that I'm excluding the extension here. I don't need to add the .tpl.php extension. Drupal will automatically add that for me. So I just need the name of the template file here. So I'm just going to name it comment-form. I can then go ahead and create that file in our theme. I'll create a new file. I'm going to save my new file inside of our 960 robots theme with the name of comment-form.tpl.php. I can save that. Just to show that it's working, I'll say this is the comment form inside of the file. Now if I go back to our site and I refresh the cache so that it reloads the theme registry, discovers my new template file, and uses that, I can scroll down to the bottom of the page, and you can see that our comment form is actually replaced with the contents of that template file. Awesome, it's doing what I wanted it to. Now I need to just actually print out the form inside of that template file. What I could do is simply take this code from our comment form theme function and put that into the template file and just replace this return line here with the print function, and it would essentially do the same thing. But instead of doing that, I'm actually going to do a couple of other things. What I'm going to do is create a new preprocess function for the comment template file that we just created. So I'll create a function using the naming convention for preprocess functions. I'll name it the name of my theme underscore preprocess underscore the name of the template file. So in this case, comment underscore form. And as always, our preprocess functions take a single argument named variables. This variables array in our preprocess function contains exactly the same content as this variables array for the theme function. Note, however, our theme function here is no longer being used because we've decided we'd like you to use a template file instead. Then what I'll do is inside of my preprocess function, I'm actually going to go ahead and create some new variables for our template file. You'll remember in a preprocess function, any key inside of this variables array becomes the name of a variable in your template file. So I'm going to add a couple of lines in my preprocess function here to create two new variables for my template file. I'm going to create a variable that in the comment template file will be named $author underscore field and one that will be named $subject underscore field. And I'm going to assign those two new variables the value of the elements from that form, the comment form, rendered out to HTML. So each of these will be a string, the rendered HTML that represents that form element. Just like in the theme function we used before, we'll use Drupal render to render those two elements. I can also make another variable named everything else, just like in our theme function before, but in this case, I'm now assigning it to a new key inside of the variables array. And just like in our theme function, I can go ahead and before I render that everything else, hide the format options from the comment body field. So essentially what I've got here is the same code that I had inside of the theme function, but now I'm just creating some new variables for our template file instead of doing that inside of the theme function. And save that. And now I can go ahead and flesh out our comment-form.tpl.php file. I'll go ahead and delete this dummy text. And now I can actually just start filling out the HTML that I want to use for this form. I'll create a new div with our class of grid3 and alpha, since this is the first div. That's going to contain our author field. I can also add a second div that contains our subject field. And just to keep it clean, I'll add a third div that contains everything else. Because I went ahead in our preprocess function, created some new variables, all I need to do is now print those variables out inside of my comment form template file. So I can print the author field variable and the subject field variable. And finally, I can print everything else. And save that, switch back to my site. I need to clear the cache so that Drupal finds our new preprocess function and makes those variables available to our template file. And then once I've done that, I can refresh the page, and I should see our comment form showing up. So there's our comment form. Back to what we had before. The HTML here is the same, with the exception of that additional div that we added around everything else. But what you'll see is that we now have something that's a bit easier to understand and more maintainable. We now have a separate template file for that comment form. In this case, our form only has 3 fields that we're printing out. But for forms like the node editing form, which get a lot more complex, it can be nice to have it printed out inside of a template file, rather than being a whole bunch of concatenated strings inside of a theme function. It also makes it a little bit easier for designers and themers who may be coming along to make changes to this template file when all they need to be able to do is understand the different HTML portions of it and not necessarily the Drupal specifics. It's also nice because I, as the themer who knows how to make use of Drupal's template.php file and render things using the Drupal render function, like we've done in the example here, can do that work of creating a new variable named $author_field that contains the author field, $subject_ field that contains the subject field, and so forth. And someone that doesn't necessarily know the internals of how these systems work in Drupal, all they need to know is that there is a variable named $author_field that contains the author field that needs to get printed out in order for that form to work. Back in our template.php file, I can also go ahead and remove this implementation of the 960robots_comment_form function because this function is no longer getting called now that we have a template file instead. Go save that. And you can see that by making use of a lot of the things that we've learned throughout the course of the theming series, we can start to make things a little bit cleaner and a lot easier to maintain.